The look of Fury Road was integral to its overall success, so you think it'd be weird to invite some sort of aesthetic deviation, right? I mean, I did expect a slight shift due to the change in cinematographer, but I trusted in George to make it work as well as he did last time. With the bar being in heaven, I thought I'd at least wait for a trailer to drop before looking for a reason to worry. And here we are. Furiosa's Wasteland is not the same beast as Max's, and my internal conflict regarding the look only grows stronger by the rewatch. No, it doesn't look as good as Fury Road, which feels like both an unfair and ungrateful demand. Like, can't we just be glad that we've already got a George Miller directed Cirque du Soleil produced, gorgeously grotesque, car fair performance art thing? As grateful as I am to have lived to see it, it's hard to move on and accept the aesthetic divergence. It's like reconnecting with a good friend after 8 years without any contact. He's changed, and I'm torn. Then there's the internet, notably Twitter, which never ceases to impress me with its collection of insane hyperbolic takes. I at least try to make sense. Like, damn, never thought I'd see the day where people would turn against Fury Road just to try to rationalize why Furiosa looks bad to them. Going as far as saying that Furiosa looks bad because Fury Road looked bad and it's just copying it.
Mental institution.
I'll leave this one to the underpaid psychiatrists. After having rewatched the trailer at least 50 times, not including having it on loop while writing the script, I've got a conclusion. To try to fault the green screen or the usage of CG would miss the point, and it sure as hell isn't the color correction or the unfinished effects. I'm so over the, oh, the footage isn't finished, wait till the movie comes out response. Did anyone have any issues with this shot when shown in that Comic-Con trailer? No, because it's well photographed. It's a pretty shot even if unfinished. No one ever comes up with the "it's not finished" excuse whenever the photography/visual direction is already on point. I was totally vibing with the shots from that Jupiter Ascending teaser, and yet look at the final product. Today's qualms come from aesthetic decisions and not in completion. I'll get into that in a minute. I also can't blame the change in cinematographer despite some subtle but noticeable differences. This is John Seal. He's collaborated with George for Lorenzo's Oil, Mad Max Fury Road, and 3,000 Years of Longing. This is Simon Duggan. He shot Warcraft, Hacksaw Ridge, and 300. Rise of an Empire. Not the biggest fan of that hazy, overexposed, fuzzy look, but I thought George would make the best of it. Though you'd think that if George would collaborate with Seal again, it would have been for the Fury Road prequel and not for the movie about the Djinn, which, as a result, now looks more like Fury Road than Furiosa in terms of photography despite being everything but apocalyptic. Oh well, can't have it all. Time to play the game of putting things side by side and ask what it is that I love on the left and what I don't on the right. So noticeable differences. The highlights in Simon's photography almost seem overblown, bordering on pure whites, while the highlights in Seal's photography still have some color and remain subdued, allowing us to better feel the skin's texture even when reflecting the light. We can all recall how Fury Road's blue skies became part of its memorable aesthetic, but there was a white haze to better blend it with its desert, resulting in a much more unified canvas. Also held by the color grade instead of having the blues and the yellows separated by mere pixels, creating an image that serves Microsoft background. Take a moment to appreciate one of my top 10 shots from Fury Road, just Furiosa's face with shallow depth of field yet sharply focused, emphasizing those strings of hair against the blurred background. I've been looking at this shot for 10 minutes now. The contrast came from that sharpness between the subjects versus their backgrounds, and the depth between light and dark. That's how you get those scrumptious black and white images, especially thanks to those beautifully carved mountains which came off as all being part of the same landscape and not various superimposed cutout pieces like in Furiosa. The landscape isn't shown with the same amount of deep focus, though you can't exactly make that request when shooting something in what might not actually be a complete desert. I don't know, man. Not exactly easy to go from something that was so gorgeously crisp, gritty, oily, sweaty, and grainy to something akin to Speed Racer. But don't get me wrong, Speed Racer slaps, just not for the reasons I'd find in a Mad Max movie as I'd normally know it. It's just that Fury Road rarely came off this way, even though it totally used green screen more than we'd notice. I respect the boldness, but damn, I wouldn't have minded a heads up before switching gears like that. Though I say this as if a trailer wasn't a heads up. And there was this 80s trend of having your trilogy go through this aesthetic metamorphosis, and I think that people, myself included, are just displeased in witnessing the same phenomenon. The Mad Lads basically speedrunning through the Wachowskis' aesthetic journey, in this same franchise. Imagine if the Matrix trilogy went from this to that. He's a crazy man, But despite the change in DP, there's a relief in seeing that George is the kind of director whose technique thrives even beyond his collaborations. George Miller's instinctual energy is still felt, making some shots feel somewhat familiar, even through this new quote-unquote perspective. You still got your high frame rate dolly shots, your centered subjects, your truck underbelly shots, your occasional vehicles shot against daylight, the kookiness. All things that define George's visual language when playing in the wasteland. Wait, scratch that. It's a George Miller thing regardless, and I think it's all back in Furiosa, only without the grounded appeal that reintroduced many and introduced many others to the dystopia. And when it comes to the kookiness, I'm sorry to say that you just had to see it coming. George Miller is basically Sam Raimi if he were into cars instead of skulls. They both ride on that same branch of professional camp, proving that something can be both campy and artsy. A concept that just doesn't seem to sink into the minds of larger audiences. His technique not only makes his insane aesthetic more acceptable, but also makes it easy to dismiss the more clownish side of his appeal. Not many directors get to create a world as kooky as they wish with an equal amount of desired sincerity, or a serious world through a funny veneer. I put George on that list of veteran directors who could have easily subdued their style as some kind of performative maturity, but just cranked it up to 80 instead. This doesn't look like something directed by a man approaching his 80s, which is something I said for Fury Road for its own reasons. I think what'll really work in preserving the vibe of this modern era of Mad Max, if not the aesthetic, is Junkie XL's return as a composer. If not for the literal vehicles, Tom was the film's true driving force and was an immense component of its identity. Music is like the universal shortcut to hacking your emotions, something John Williams spent generations proving to us in franchises spanning over directors and cinematographers. The vibe is secured. Bit strange not being a fan of most of the choices I'm seeing displayed for Furiosa so far. Like between this and that, it's gonna be Fury Road any day of the week. But contrary to say Rebel Moon, it's easier for me to defend and justify those choices. I can try not to be cliched by saying that it feels more like a dream or a memory, and instead say that it feels like a story told through a more childlike perspective, like a fairy tale. Side note, I'm glad that this queen is shown wearing various outfits instead of some lazy variation of what we're familiar with, unlike in some other franchise without calling anyone out. Like, shake up that wardrobe, guy. Should have gone for that duster in episode 7, but whatevs. Glad to see them making fashion out of that wasteland. If I've got one gripe about the fits, it's that they look a little too unworn in some parts. Like, throw some dirt on them rags. And how about you do the same with the rides? Fury Road's vehicles were rust-ridden, covered in sand, and not, shiny in chrome. I just preferred it when it looked like washing your clothes in sand was the new custom, or when cars looked like they saw history. Here, it all looks like, well, cosplay. And yet I accept it all because there are still shots that deserve some respect. Nothing better than a veteran film director showing the kids in the industry how it's done. I've replayed this shot so many times because I'm just impressed by how smoothly and clearly framed it all is. It feels like a shot that would normally be achieved with CG, but that dust looks a little too convincing. Just a crazy good stunt with the perfect camera movement to complement it. Classic Miller. Quality GIF. I like the combo of that car's lateral spin matched with the door's downward motion. It looks intricately staged, even though there are probably two elements shot separately. Love it regardless. It's a very storyboarded looking shot, and that's a good thing. It's less the idea of it all being in camera and more the decision to have those two things happening in the same frame that exudes fun and creativity. Very kooky. Good GIF. Showing two intricate things happening simultaneously kind of clues you in on a filmmaker's refined approach and experience. Come to think of it, it's almost like having a background in animation gives you some sort of instinctual advantage. Pretty neat. I feel a need to say those things because I feel like those small details, while felt on a subconscious level, are ultimately dismissed by most, but I got you. Now you see what I see. You're welcome. We're meant to see Furiosa lose an arm, and you gotta respect someone willing to shake away the conventions by recounting some dark tale through a sugary lens. It's disarming and I love that. Shout out to Made in Abyss. Good segue into me getting anime vibes from this. I just couldn't yet put my finger on it until I noticed the exaggerated highlights in everyone's eyes, as if they got them Q-tipped before the shoot. It just adds this extra layer of soul and expressivity to everyone's face, something I sort of subconsciously felt in Fury Road. Most movies obviously have it, some more than others, but here it's more apparent than normal, which just comes off as intentional. Love that. You can totally take this as me saying that George Miller would be an appropriate choice to adapt some anime property. One of those rare filmmakers who I find to carry both a visual and tonal match to the medium. See? How are you feeling now? Bit relieved, hopefully. There are good things in here. Can't exactly force anyone to like something, but you can at least guide them towards some level of understanding. Notice how I didn't just bash one thing, because that's the funny thing about movies. A film's allure, or lack thereof, rarely falls on a single piece. It's always the marriage of elements coordinated for specific intent, occasionally resulting in something destined to be iconic. It's harmony. As much as I still prefer the look of Fury Road, I've got a feeling that whatever this film is doing visually will end up being more appropriate for Furiosa's Odyssey. Would have been pretty narrow-minded of me to return to that beautiful wasteland and expect it to look exactly the same as it did 8 years ago. Worlds change just as the people who create them. I'm assuming there are good non-metatextual reasons to go from this to that. Hope I'm right. God, I hope I'm right. George Miller's an artist first and a businessman second, so I gotta respect the mindset. But if everything I mentioned was circumstantial and not intentional, I'll gladly accept this massive L. Though I can't forgive a curveball for uniqueness, and I see the potential. George Miller is 79 years old and he seems to be anything but rusty. But if all else fails, at least it's another banger workout album on its way.